part of our two-day Tribal Youth Symposium that Eric Watson has been organizing and coordinating for the last couple years. We've had a wonderful day and a half of conversations and activities around everything tribal, workforce development, culture, and everything. So thank you so much for being with us. This is an exciting 4 hours that we're going to have. I first wanted to just introduce myself, Tabitha Toloff. I work for Cook Inlet Tribal Council and I serve as their Chief Administrative Officer. My heritage is Athabascan and Russian. My great grandmother was Margaret Albert Reed from Rampart. And my great grandfather was Peter Toloff from Russia, and lived in Alaska my entire life. And I love working for Cook Inlet Tribal Council and doing the work that I do here. I want to just give a little bit of context for the purpose of this part of the summit. Last year, when our board of directors was developing our tribal goals, we have a huge tribal goal every year. We really were thinking about our youth and, what is it that our youth need as it relates to workforce and leadership development opportunities. And so we decided to create a huge goal around this and engage our amazing Youth Advisory Council members who have really helped create this day, this agenda. They've done a lot of legwork prepping themselves and are awesome presenters that you're going to hear from and engage with later on today. I want to first just introduce Ann Kandick, who is one of our Youth Advisory Council members, and she will maybe be able to give herself a little bit more of an introduction when she introduces one of the speakers. We also have Brittany Vo, who is amazing, and she's going to be introducing herself a little bit more as she introduces one of our speakers as well. And then we also have Taylor Higgins, and Taylor's going to be with us remotely, and we're going to be using both her, Brittany, and Ann to really coordinate this event. We do have one other newer Youth Advisory Council member who I'd like to acknowledge because I think she may be here online, and that's Alicia Garcia. And she's new to the fold. She came in a little midstream here with this event, but we're going to be able to definitely leverage her her voice into our youth programs as we move past this year. So with that, I want to let Eric Watson take it over. I believe he's going to share our first engagement activity. Eric, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Tabitha. Okay, so for today's summit, we're going to have a few different formats I want everyone to get oriented to while we have a moment. So we will be utilizing a program called Poll Everywhere for some polling, which is going to be really kind of neat. And that'll be run by me and Jordan Ransom from Siri. And so throughout the conference, we'll push out polling through Poll Everywhere. We're going to prompt everyone to listen and to participate in that. When we do our breakout rooms, which we'll have in between guest speakers, we're going to do the Poll Everywhere, and we're going to discuss it in smaller groups. During the breakout sessions, we'll reconvene, and then we'll listen to our next guest speaker. And we'll follow that same format up until the end of the summit. And then at the very end, we're going to go through and talk about and show you guys all the results from the Poll Everywhere and everything that the outcome of that. And then we'll do our closing activity. For the Poll Everywhere, you can use it through your desktop or you can use it through a mobile device. So if you have a cell phone, you can actually log in that way too, which is pretty cool. So with that said, I'm going to put a link in the chat box real quick. And if everyone can follow that link, you'll be able to observe the poll and participate that way. Oops, I sent it to the wrong person. Okay. Okay, perfect. So you should have the link in the Poll Everywhere. So if you can take a moment and on your cell phone or your computer, if you can log into that website, that will bring up the polling that we'll be doing. Okay. Okay, so if everyone can take just a moment on this first question, where do you currently live? And I think with just your finger or your mouse, place a marker where you're currently at. Okay, so we'll give it just one more moment and then we'll move on to our next question. Okay, perfect. Thank you for those responses. Okay, so I'm going to press the next button and it should auto update on your phone or your computer.
I can't see the results.
That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so for this next question, if leadership were an animal, what animal would that be for you? So this can be any animal, whatever speaks to you for this response. You should have a chat box where you can put your response in. If you can do that now, that would be great. Okay, we're still getting responses in, so we'll give it just another minute. Got some good responses, a lot. Okay, so I should mention for these surveys, when we do the word cloud, if a word's bigger than the other words, that means it has multiple responses. And so as you can see on the image, wolf and lion and leadership, those are some of the words that have really popped up to the top.
I put cheetah, Eric.
Yeah, that's the wrong answer, Tabitha, sorry. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you all for doing this. So we're going to go back to the presentation. This is warming you up to how to use Poll Everywhere. When we do those breakout sessions, you're not going to be able to see the survey, but you are going to be able to see the question on your phone or the web browser that you're using. And then we'll talk about all this at the very end of the summit.
Thank you, Eric. And I'll just pop in really quick and say that we are going to have Taylor Higgins introduce and moderate the conversation with Emily Edenshaw. Taylor, are you ready?
Hi, Tabitha, I'm ready.
All right, let's take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Higgins, and I am part of the Youth Advisory Council. I am a Siri shareholder and descendant. I am Yupik Athabaskan and Aleut, and I'm a Heritage Ambassador for Ferrandi. Today, I am introducing Emily Edenshaw, the President and CEO of the Alaska Native Heritage Center. She's a great, amazing mentor, and she just inspires me as a youth. And I'm just so happy to have work history with her and have her as a friend. And I'm just really excited to get started with her. So Emily, if you are ready, we can have you introduce yourself. It's really good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Emily Edenshaw. I am Yupik and Inupiaq. My family comes from Imanik, Alaska, and I have the honor to live and work on the Dena'ina lands as the president and CEO of the Alaska Native Heritage Center. My grandparents are John and Cecilia Sipri, and my great-grandparents are Pearlie and Axel Johnson. So, Guyana, thank you for having me. So, sorry. I wasn't sure if you were going to ask me a question or if it's okay for me just to jump right in.
Yes, that's totally fine.
Okay, good. So as I shared, my name is Emily Edenshaw. I've been in my role for about 3 years here at the Heritage Center. When I think back of my time here, I just think it's such a blessing to be able to be here working on behalf of my people at the Heritage Center. When I was thinking about what I wanted to share today, I was really just reminded of, just my journey, the footsteps that have brought me to this place in time. And, when I was early on in my career, like many of you, my auntie once told me, the closest distance between two people is a story. And so I wanted to share a little bit about myself. So I am Yupik and I'm a Nupiaq. I was born in Fairbanks, even though my roots start in Emonic. And I was primarily raised between Fairbanks and Texas. When I moved down to Texas, I was about 5 years old, and we moved down to a place that was literally 10 minutes away from the Texas-Mexico border. And if you could imagine that, I was living in an area where, people looked a lot like me. I had, dark hair. Everywhere I went, everyone spoke Spanish. I was part of a folklorico group. And, again, everywhere I went, I just assumed I was Hispanic, just because of where I lived. And it wasn't until I was about 9 or 10 when my mom found her biological family. When she sat me down, we had the conversation of, she said, Emily, you're not Hispanic, you're actually Alaska Native. And I remember that conversation because, and looking back, she would always wear these purple beaded earrings, but, I was little, and I just never thought to ask about the earrings. But I remember it started making more sense. And from that moment on, I just really held that really close to my heart. I'd like to say I was pretty rebellious when I would have to go to Spanish class. I would ask them, what about Alaska Native language? How come I'm not learning Alaska Native language? And even though I was like living in Texas, and that was kind of a lot of my experience. I knew I was Native, but I didn't know what that meant. And by the time I got to high school, it was it was very much kind of, my identity and my culture was just really just distilled down to a punchline of a joke. People would ask me, oh, were you born in an igloo? And just these really ignorant questions. And I would like to say, in the absence of knowing who you are, and I've heard this before, in the absence of culture, what grows? And, when I look back, I was just really angry at the world. I knew I was Native, but I didn't know what that meant. And for me, when you ask that question, like, in the absence of culture, what grows? For me, it was that anger, and it was really unhealthy habits. I started partying really young at a young age, started hanging out with an older crowd, just doing mischievous things that teenagers, and if my kids today did it, they would be grounded forever. But, looking back, I was just so lost. I was angry. And by the time I got to college, my mom, when I look back, I was just in a really dark place. And my mom saw that I was struggling, and she said, Emily, I'm moving back to Alaska. Why don't you come up for the summer? And truth be told, I had no desire to stay here. I just thought it was a free trip. And, I'll never forget coming up. We left from Bellingham, and we arrived in Haines or Skagway. And I'll never forget the way that our air is different in Alaska. And I just remember feeling so connected. I didn't even know I was in Southeast, but I was in Southeast. And I knew that I was getting closer to, like, it just felt right. And, when I got to Fairbanks, it just, that experience of it just felt right kept on happening. And I decided, when I look back, it was almost like a moment of awakening for me. It was just a very, very, the clearest picture. I knew that if I went back to Texas, I was going to be in a really dark place. I was either going to wind up in jail or wind up dead. And I just remember being in this place of just knowing, I called my dad, and I had probably one of the most realist and authentic conversations I've ever had with anybody. And it was like a 1,000 weights came off my shoulder. And I just told my dad, I really, I don't know what the future looks like, but I really need to stay in Alaska. And I don't know if many of you have heard the saying, like, when you're on the right path, things just start falling into place. Well, I enrolled into UAF. So if any other, Nanooks are on here, I just want to give you all a shout out. But when I went there, you know, as I shared, I just came up from Texas and they have this policy. It's like, oh, you know, if your parents graduated from here, you get in-state tuition. And, you know, it just so happened that it had to be the admissions week. And so it was all these little things that were really telling me I was right where I was supposed to be. And I was following that, you know, that little voice inside you. I was following that gut, you know, that gut feeling. And like I said, I had to have that really authentic conversation with my father. And, you know, I enrolled at UAF, and, you know, it was interesting because when I look back at UAF, you know, I felt, you know, even though in Texas, I would tell people I was Alaska Native, I had no idea what that meant. But when I was at UAF, I would also tell people I was Native, but then they would start asking me questions like, well, what type of Native are you? And who are your grandparents? And I just remember being like feeling more lost than ever. I had no idea why they were asking me who my grandparents were. I had no idea that, you know, the difference between Yupik and Inupiaq and Southeast. And I will never forget, I was just feeling really just deflated. And I met this boy and his name was Jacob Tyrell. And, you know, I would like to say everything was history after that. You know, we fell in love, we got married, and you know, Jake was the type of man that he was so proud. He would say, you know, my wife is Alaska Native. In fact, he took me, you know, one of the first times I ever visited a village was with Jake. And he just was so proud that his wife was part of such a beautiful community. And so we wound up having a little girl, and we had adopted my little sister. And, you know, I want to say, you know, being young and getting married at such a young age, you know, you think everything is going to be rainbows and, you know, super easy. But the truth is it was really hard. We were really young. We were kids raising kids. And I'll never forget, you know, it was on June 28th, the night before his accident. We wound up getting into one of the biggest fights that we had ever gotten in. I mean, slamming doors, screaming at each other. And then the next morning on June 29th, I was leaving to go to work. And again, it was that little voice inside me that said, Emily, turn around and apologize. Go back in. And I never did that. I never did that. And I just, I followed that voice inside me, and I went back in and I apologized. And I'm so, so thankful that I did, because that morning he was killed in an accident, and our daughter was only 14 months old. And when I think of that day, you know, there are days even today, even though it's been 15 years, there are days even today, it feels like yesterday. My daughter who went through that, you know, she was only a baby at the time. And so by the time she got to, you know, 3 years old, 4 years old, it was like he had died all over again. And, you know, going through that challenge in my life, you know, this is something that even today, you know, I just remind myself, if I could get through that, if I could get through one of the hardest things that, you know, anyone has to face in their lifetime, burying a spouse, burying your best friend, you know, losing a marriage to death, you know, being able to go through that and what came after it. I just remind myself that if I could get through that, I can get through anything. And, you know, Jacob and I wanted to have a life for our kids. He was getting his master's at UAF, and, you know, we were young, we didn't have any life insurance. And so when I talk about those moments of clarity, you remember the first one, my first one was, I knew that if I went back to Texas, you know, it wasn't going to be good for me. The second really moment of clarity for me was, I really need to get my education. I knew that if I wanted to give a life, you know, provide a life for my kids, I would have to, you know, go to school and learn. And I think my subconscious at the time, when I look back, I was so familiar with loss. I didn't want anyone or anything to take anything away from me, because I had just buried Jacob. And, you know, I remember growing up, my grandmother would always tell me, Emily, you know, you need to get an education, because that's one thing no one can ever take from you. And it was just that, you know, kind of that little voice in my head. So I decided to finish my degree at UAA. And it was there where I really just threw myself into groups like the Alaska Native Professional Association, PRSSA, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to get my education. But I'll just share an experience I had there. I don't know if many of you are in college. I first, I thought I was going to be a sociologist, then I was going to be an accountant, then I was going to be an anthropologist. And then finally I decided to do journalism, which they have nothing to do with each other. But, you know, when you go through, you know, that's what college is about, you know. And one of my biggest teachers in life is that sometimes you have, you know, in order for you to learn what you don't want to do, you have to do it. And I now know I don't want to be an accountant. I now know I don't want to be an anthropologist. But I'm sharing this because by the time I became a journalism student, my professor sat me down and he just said, Emily, you are just not smart enough. You are not smart enough. You're not a strong writer. You should really consider changing your degree. And I just remember feeling, you know, I had finally decided what I wanted to be. I was so excited about it. And then to hear that from someone in a leadership position, I was just devastated. But, you know, I remember just thinking, you know, this guy doesn't even know who I am. He doesn't know what I'm capable of. He didn't know my personal story. And I just decided in that moment, I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to do it because of him. I'm going to show myself that I can do it. So, you know, I not only did I hire a writing coach, I spent every waking moment that I could in the writing center. I joined student clubs. I did internships with like Alicia Pipeline, where I was able to meet Tabitha Toloff. And, you know, that was something for me. Even now to this day, I struggle with my writing. It's not something that comes natural to me, but I know that there are tools out there that can help me become a better writer. And, you know, just because someone has an opinion about you, that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, the finite ending, right? And so for me, it was just really the fire. He lit a fire in me. And from there, I was able to, like I said, I was able to go on and get, you know, internship programs. I worked at the Anchorage Police Department. And I'm really proud to share that I graduated with my bachelor's from UAA. And I decided, you know, this was something when I was working at Alicia Pipeline with Tabitha, I was an intern there, and I'll never forget, his name was Tom Barrett. He was the CEO at the time. He sat me down and he said, Emily, if you want to go on, and if you want to get, you know, have more options for you and your kids, you have to get your master's degree. And so that's what I did. I didn't give, you know, wait any time. I went on and I got my master's degree. And I'm really proud to share with you, you know, but for the grace of God, I'm able to, now I'm a fourth year PhD student. And I say that with so much love and honor and respect and gratitude. If it wasn't for my ancestors, you know, when I talk about that little voice inside you, I believe in with every ounce of my being that it was my ancestors guiding me back. I believe that our Creator puts people in our path, like Tabitha was put in my path. I was her intern. You know, she's now my board chair at the Heritage Center. I also believe that challenges in life, you know, even though you're going through them, I think, you know, in Indigenous people in general, we just have this beautiful ability. And I don't want to romanticize struggle, but I want to make sure that everyone knows when we go through struggle, we could turn it into a source of strength. And, you know, to be able to witness my kids, you know, I have my son, Oliver, he has found his voice. He's out advocating for what he's passionate about. And to be able to witness that, like I said, it's just, there is something larger in this universe, larger than myself, larger than each and every one of us. And for me, being able to go through and to be on this journey, it has, you know, there's so many other like larger things working in my life. And I'm just incredibly grateful. When I think of you know, challenges and successes, you know, I just, like I said, I continue to remind myself that, you know, we're going to fall, we're going to make mistakes in life, we're going to piss people off, excuse my language. But when we fall forward. And I just would really encourage every youth on here, find your passion. For me, it's being immersed in my community. I'm 38 years old. I am just now learning how to introduce myself. I'm making my first parka. You are never too old to learn how to sew or to learn how to introduce yourself in your language. At every entry point, just know that you are part of a community that loves you, that needs you to use your voice to stand up and fight for what's right. I'll just share, I just got off a call with a tourism association. The work that we're doing here at the Heritage Center with the tourism industry as a whole is really historic. And I just want to share, each and every one of you can make a difference. And even if your voice is shaky, or if you stumble, know that you have a voice, and our ancestors need you, our community, our future ancestors need you to use your voice and to stand up. And so with that, like I said, I am just incredibly grateful to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And I, like I said, I'm excited to see what you all do, and just know that I'm a resource. And if I can get through this, like I said, when challenges come up in your life, you will be able to turn that into a source of strength. So not only that you can pull from later, but for, your kids or your nieces and nephews can pull from that. So thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Emily. I mean, you're amazing. You're such an incredible Indigenous woman. And when I met you, I just felt like we had an automatic connection. I mean, you're just a great and powerful leader. I feel like that we all need. Sometimes we all lose direction, and we need that kind of humbling experience. And you've taught me so much, and especially me being a youth. So I'm just really grateful and humbled to know you and have a relationship with you. I have 2 questions. I mean, if we get through them. So one of my questions is, what is your best advice for youth who are facing personal challenges or cultural identity challenges? That was one of my favorite questions I've created, but I just wanted to hear your perspective on that.
I would say youth really struggling with their identity or their cultural identity. This is something that I've struggled with my whole life. I've got, it just happened this last weekend. Oh, you're Native, you don't look Native. Oh, you don't sound Native, or, oh, you weren't raised in a village, so you're less than Native than me, or you're only 1/4 Native. And for me, the best way that I would, my advice to you all is that's not yours to carry. I'll never forget, I had a conversation with a leader whom I love. His name is Oliver Levitt. I'll never forget, I was at Nalukituck, and he was asking me about my family, and he said, what side are, you're Native, who's Native in your family? And I said, oh, I'm only 1/4 Native. And he said, which part? Your arm, your head, your leg? And he's like, you're Native, Emily, you're Native. And to be able to hear that from a leader who is one of my heroes, I think there's, it's a reminder that we have to unlearn these things. They're hurtful. They hit you to the deepest, darkest, most intimate places within your being, but that's not yours to carry. And I'm here to tell you, like I shared earlier, at any point, if you're 18 or you're 88, and you want to reconnect to who you are part of a community that loves you. You are part of a community that needs you, and find a way. For me, when I moved, as I shared, after Jake died, the way that I started getting reconnected to my community, actually went to the Native hospital. And I didn't take no for an answer. I would ask them, are there any groups? And then I would ask at UAA. And I just found, I was thinking every entry point, if I can't get reconnected at the Native hospital, how can I get reconnected at school? How can I get reconnected at work? And so I'll just share with everyone, find those places where you can get reconnected. And I just want to share with you, at the Heritage Center, we're offering, college, it's called the Inglewood program at UAA and APU. We offer community dance nights. But for me, like I said, I just try to find every entry point to find and to strengthen my own knowledge. And here I am, now that I'm 38, and I have so much more to continue to learn. I don't want to say like I've arrived, because this is a lifelong journey. I'm at a point now where I'm starting to share it out with other people. And that's something that has really been instilled in me from another auntie of mine. She told me, and I'll share this with you. She said, Emily, you do not belong to you. You belong to your community. And therefore you have a responsibility to grow your skills to benefit your community. And to me, that's one of my guiding teachings in my life. I know that I don't belong to myself. I'm part of something bigger than me. And like I said, it's so exciting to be on this journey at 38. And like I said, I've been called every name in the book, a Johnny come lately, and that's not traditional. That lateral oppression is not traditional, and it's not yours to carry. And I would tell the youth and even the adults who struggle with their identity, thank goodness you're able to do it at 38 versus, never being able to do it. It's such a beautiful experience, and know that I'm on this journey with you.
Thank you, Emily. We have a few more minutes, so I was wondering if you would like to answer one more question that I have. My question is just like, what made you want to become a leader in your community? Like, what were some things that you've seen that weren't really connecting all the way, or some breakthroughs that you just wanted to fix? Like, what was your inspiration?
Well, one of the, when I was able to step into this role, I'll never forget when Tabitha reached out to me. I was just like, really, me? You think I even have a shot at this? And I think as a woman, as a Native woman, and just, we struggle with that imposter syndrome, right? And what I know now is that I'm a lifelong learner, and I know that leadership, it's not just about a position, it's a way of life, it's learning, it's being able to teach others. And so for me to be able to be in my position, I'll never forget Jeff Kinnevac once told me when I started this position, he said, Emily, don't let the title make you, you make the title. And I just remind myself that the way that I show up every day, there's nothing that I won't ask my incredible staff to do that I won't do. I fundamentally believe that, my superpower, I guess you would say, aside from like native bling, is my truth. And to be able to speak truth and to stand in my truth. As a Yupik woman, it's a value that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And so for me, when I think of like me being a leader today, and when people, I don't want to say, kind of put me in that light, I just am constantly reminded of the many, women in my life that had helped me get to this point. And if I aspire to be a leader who I want to be today, I think of the people who are going to be carrying my name many years down the line. So I shared with everyone, my name is Keneg Nagyagak, and I was given this name by my uncle, and he told me that I don't carry the name carries me. And when I think of my leadership and how I show up today, I think of the people who are going to be named after me. And, to me, that's just a guiding principle. And I'll just share with everyone that, each and every one of you are leaders. You don't need to have a title to be a leader. You can get out there and get involved. Our aunties, our uncles, and just know that when you step into these positions, or you're on boards, just know that, to be able to be in a service role, for me, I very much define my leadership as a servant style leader. I'm incredibly thankful for my team. And like I said, it's a lifelong journey. And I'll just say that one of my biggest teachers in my time as a leader is failure. I have made many mistakes, and when I fall forward, and I just got to get right back up again. And so the last thing I'll say, stepping into this role and being able to work at the tribe and other leadership positions, one of my biggest things that I would just really recommend is to get a mentor. I actually have, Tabitha is one of my mentors. Susan Anderson is one of my mentors. I have people in my life that when I am going through, just really hard challenges, whether if it's in my life, my work life, or my personal life, when I think of this position that I'm in today, I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't for Susan, Tabitha, Oliver, Liz, I could continue naming them, and they've just really instilled and taught me so much. And I know today I have a responsibility to share that out. And so to be able to work with, people like Taylor, and we have Rena here, for me, it's, I'd like to say my feet are trained, and it's something that brings me joy. And so I would just encourage everyone, get a mentor and use your mentor. And, when you have time, immediately start working with other people, other youth, because they're so hungry for it. So yeah, thank you for asking me that question.
Thank you so much for all your time and all the amazing things you've told us and opened up to us, and got to let us kind of connect with you virtually. It was really inspiring, and you lead me every day to be the best young woman I can be, even from a distance. And so I just really appreciate you. And on behalf of the Youth Advisory Council, we're just so thankful for your time, for letting us hear your story and giving us a glimpse of you. So just thank you for all of that, Emily.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I believe we're ready to transition to the next part of the agenda. So for this next part, we're going to move into our breakout rooms. We'll auto-generate 6 rooms. Everyone's going to be put into separate rooms. If you have the opportunity to, please turn your mic on and your video on so people can see you and you can interact. And we're going to push out a poll again and poll everywhere. I just put the link in the chat again. So if you can follow that link on your mobile device or web browser and answer that and discuss that in your small group, we'll come back in about 7 minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning before we come back as a bigger group. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms and try not to mess up this whole summit in the process. Okay, perfect. Okay, just open up all the rooms. It should prompt you to join those rooms. If you don't join them, it'll automatically put you in one in just a moment. So thank you.
Right.
We've been in this room and there's no one talking
Oh,
or anything going on.
I think everyone's on mute right now.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
So I'm just going to ask everyone in this room to unmute. And I think I'm going to try and go back to the main session. If you need anything, let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. A prompt discussion if you'd like.
Yeah,
How's it going?
good. Hi, everyone. So I know we're all in here. I wanted to ask, according to our question, I just wanted to hear your guys' story and what pushes you to be like the best you that you can be. I mean, like, I just love hearing everyone's different stories and, everyone's different humbling experience to be the best youth that they can be. I feel like, especially in Indigenous youth, our stories are so important and they're not holdbacks. They're kind of like what pushes you to be the best you. So I just really want to know. I can tell my story. I mean, if I could go first. I mean, I just want to know who's in here. I'd love to conversate with you guys.
I'm Sam.
Hi, Sam. So my name is Taylor. I'm the Youth Advisory Council here with you guys, and so I don't know my story. I'm really young. I'm 19 years old. I just turned 19 just 3 weeks ago. And I've growing up, everyone has their own challenges, and I had my own too. I got to meet so many different people from all across the communities and in different all across of Alaska. One reason I asked Emily the question about cultural identity is because when growing up, I would be like part of like Indian Ed classes, and I lived in Mountain View when I was younger, and I people would tell me like I don't look Native enough, and I have my blonde hair and blue eyes, so that doesn't really I'm not included in our community, which kind of like really like downed me. I felt like I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't pretty enough to be like, in our community or wanting to do the best I could be. But growing up, I had to connect myself with so many different things. I learned how to bead. I learned how to create earrings and headdresses and mucklucks and moccasins, like just so many things. And so I feel like there was just this journey that I had to go through as a teenager in high school, to be the best I could be. In middle school, I wasn't hanging around the best group that I could have. They didn't really have a goal or visions for themselves, and it kind of made me lose who I was. And so it's so important around, especially about who you put yourself around. It's, being an Indigenous person in general, you just have to learn yourself, learn who you are. You don't want to be like the next person, or that's what I had to learn, and that was my biggest struggle. Because I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to be cool and just try to be like, be like them. But I had to realize like that's not realistic. You have to be your own person. You have to be your own kind of cool. And so I had to learn that about myself. And I just, now I'm here. I work really hard to be a part of something like Youth Advisory Council, and I'm just really excited to see where you guys, like to meet you guys. And I hope that one day you guys can work alongside with me, and we can all be young future Indigenous youth leaders. We already are, but let's make goals and great visions for ourselves and for our future families.
Okay, we're gonna give it just a moment for everyone to come back to the main space, and then I'm going to hand it over to Anne.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see, here we go. My name is Ann Kaindeck. I am a Youth Advisory Council member. I am also an apprentice in CITC's legal department. I'm Tlingit and Native Hawaiian. My dad is from Oahu. My mom grew up in Seward, but our Tlingit family is from the kind of Juneau and Wrangell areas. I am so excited and honored today to introduce to you Susan Anderson, President and CEO of the CIRI Foundation, and of course, the amazing Kyla Morris, who is Vice President and Director of Programs, also at TCF. I am a TCF recipient, scholarship recipient, as I'm sure many people are in this session. And I'm just looking forward to talking with Susan and Kyla about education and career and opportunities that we have in order to, be the people who we want to be. So without further ado, Susan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and maybe talking about your education and career journey to start us off.
Ganeshish, Anne, and to be totally transparent, Anne is my niece. So I am her auntie, and she knows I have that big auntie energy. So there you go. And our family originally, as she said, was from Wrangell and Juneau in the southeast part. So we are Tlingit, Eagle Wolf. And I just like to say Wasa'iyati, which is how are all of you? I know that it's been kind of a crazy couple years, so I really do like to start with that and know that I really am asking how you are, and I hope it's okay. And I just want to say again, Ganeshish to Emily for her very kind words, her very moving words, and she's an amazing person. So Ganeshish, which means it couldn't be done without you. So, well, let's see where to start. I'm actually one of the first scholarship recipients of the CIRI Foundation. So if you look at our website, you can see when we were incorporated, and I'm not going to do the math for you. So you can look that up. So to put it in perspective, going to college in our family was not a if you're going to go, it's when you're going to go, because both my parents, so Anne's grandparents, both of them were first generation folks to go to school, to college. And her grandpa, my dad, I mean, he wandered off and followed his friends off to school one year down at Western Washington University, which is also where I went. And he followed his friends off because he had the GI Bill, and he thought, well, how bad could it be? There are girls and there are parties, and okay, maybe I'll study somewhere along the line. So he ended up that way, heading there. And then, my mom, she actually traveled over to Germany not all that long after the Second World War. And so was really moved by, that experience, and ended up bringing that with her. And out of a very large family, she wanted to do something different with her life and do some different things and try and help people. So she went to school, to college. So that's how they met at Western Washington University. And, again, it wasn't if we were going to school, it was when and where we were going to school. So, being in a family of educators, because both of them were teachers, I saw the impact that they had. And even as a young person, it was like seeing the students that they taught and seeing the interaction that they had. You know, they helped them in class, but they also helped them out of the classroom. You know, we had people come over during the holidays if they didn't have a place to be. We had mom and dad helped one of their students basically learn how to read, so he could do better in school because he had missed out on that along the way. You know, you could really see the impact. So I went off and I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. And so I ended up gravitating toward education. And I thought I was going to be a teacher like my mom and dad. But looking at, you know, what could happen with an education degree, I thought, well, I could teach. And I actually tried to do that coming back to Alaska, but that was when the oil prices took a huge dip back in the day, even worse than more recently. And they were really, really hard to find jobs. So I'm like, okay, if I'm not going to be able to be a teacher because that's going to be hard, then how am I going to use this education degree to do something? And that's where I started looking and seeing that there were a lot of different ways to use your learning, because you know how to learn. And with education, I ended up working at a nonprofit international scientific society of all things. And I didn't have a science degree, didn't have a science background, but I had an education background. And so helping to organize courses and technical classes and all that for engineers and scientists and technical people inventing all kinds of amazing things, you know, I could still use that, you know, undergraduate degree. And while I was doing that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to focus in on how do adults learn? How do professionals learn? So I ended up going back and getting a master's degree, also from Western Washington University, in adult education, focused on, you know, again, how do adults learn? And especially when it comes to professional development. So that's how my, you know, educational experiences, my family experience, my educational experience sort of dovetailed into what I actually do. And then from that opportunity, when the opportunity to come home and work for the Surrey Foundation came up, it sort of made a lot of sense, because the Surrey Foundation was the organization that had helped me through a scholarship or 2 or 3 or 4. And you know, the opportunity to help other people obtain their education and cultural and heritage knowledge really too, because we do the heritage work with the nonprofits and tribal organizations as well, and trying to improve educational opportunities for Alaska Native people. It just wrapped everything all up together that I absolutely, you know, love to do. So that's sort of in general who I am professionally and personally, sort of all wrapped up together right there.
Thank you so much for sharing your educational and career journey. That, I mean, I always love learning about, you know, Grandma Nancy and Grandpa Hank. So it's really special to see how they shaped you and how they've shaped me as well. So next, Kyla, if you wouldn't mind kind of giving us the same overview of your education and career journey, and so that we can learn more about you and how you ended up as the vice president over at TCF.
Sure. So hello, everybody. My name is Kyla Morris, and I have been with the Surrey Foundation for about 9 years, which has gone by extremely fast. And I am originally from Anchorage. My mom's family is from St. Paul. And so my educational journey kind of starts with moving out to Peters Creek when I was a freshman in high school, and kind of moving from Anchorage, where I knew everybody and had gone to the same school with everybody for a long time, and kind of being like uprooted, which during your freshman year of high school is a little bit scary, because you're meeting all new people, and most of those people have known each other for a long time. But things went well, and I graduated high school, and I sort of had a similar understanding of education that Susan had. I think my parents were very supportive of getting some kind of post-secondary education. They had really, pushed that, and they had made it very clear to me that it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to go straight into, a post-secondary education after high school and being able to work part-time at the coffee shop that I was working at. And that journey was also supported by the CIRI Foundation, because I was a scholarship recipient for them, and through the Aleut Foundation, also scholarship recipient. So I just signed up for my UA classes, and I was just kind of cruising through, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but enjoying my classes. And it wasn't really until I had actually signed up for an internship that it kind of changed my whole view on education and what I was going to school for. So at the time when I was going to UAA, I just kind of shifted into a business major. And it was because I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt like business was sort of this general thing that I could go for and would be fine. And a lot of people are really good at business stuff, but it wasn't great for me, and I wasn't really enjoying all my classes. But luckily, the internship cut to First Alaskans Institute, which you guys may or may not be familiar with, but they put on elders and youth, and they have a lot of wonderful leadership development programs. And I was lucky enough to get placed with their internship at Cook Inlet Region Inc. in their public relations department. And Cook Inlet Region Inc. was actually my regional corporation, and my internship was just amazing. It was the first time I'd really gotten kind of corporate business experience. I had gotten mentored by some fabulous people who worked in the corporate communications department there. And from that moment on, I was like, I am in the wrong major. I am in the wrong field. This is not where my heart is or where I'm supposed to be. And so I flipped my whole major and I switched schools, and I ended up going to the University of Oregon, where I studied journalism with an emphasis in public relations. And things just went a lot better once I had kind of taken my formal education and smushed it around what was already an interest of mine and what I kind of already naturally had an affinity for. So ended up going to the University of Oregon, finishing out my degree there. And then I actually graduated when the economy was not doing very well either. And so at that point in time, you were just considered lucky to even get hired after graduating college. But luckily, I was looking for jobs back home, and there was a lot of the Native corporations that still had a lot of open positions, and even more exciting in the field of communications and journalism. So I ended up getting hired on at South Central Foundation and working there for a few years. And it was really rewarding being able to plan events and do like health-based communications. You get to work with a lot of people. SCF is a really big organization. And so that was kind of the natural next step. And then when I was working at South Central Foundation, my boss at the time had emailed me a job opening for the CIRI Foundation, actually, because at my current job, we got sent a lot of job openings, and our job was to advertise them through all of the communication platforms to other people. But it looked like a really interesting position. I initially did not think that I was qualified for it, but I had a relationship, with Susan. I remembered her from, different events, and I had, worked with her at the CIRI Foundation, and we kind of, had a connection there. So I emailed her about it, just straight up sent it to her and was questioning it and told her I didn't think I was qualified, and she was like, if you're even remotely interested in it, let's just have a conversation and see what your concerns are and see, how you feel about it after. So I had that one-on-one conversation with Susan, and she, really encouraged me to apply, told me to go for it. And so I applied and I interviewed, and grateful for the opportunity that I got hired as a program officer at the CIRI Foundation. And now I am the vice president and director of programs there after being there for 9 years. And Susan has been an amazing mentor and has just pushed me and encouraged me. The CIRI Foundation, we're all about education, we're all about heritage, we're all about culture, but we really sort of operationalize all of those things. So if you are working for the Siri Foundation, you are going to, you know, work to build your muscles in the places that you're uncomfortable. You're gonna, you know, take your strengths and, you know, push those forward. And if there's some kind of training that you want, some kind of webinar that you want to do, you want to go back to school, it's just going to be really encouraged. And so actually, while I was at the Siri Foundation, I was able to go for my graduate degree online through Gonzaga University, where I got a master's in leadership and communications. And then I was able to just roll that right back into what I do at the Siri Foundation. So that's kind of my bumpy path to where I ended up. But I would say, you know, my internship and being able to get hired at the Siri Foundation, and then having a boss who's very much a mentor, has kind of led me to where I am today.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And also, go Zags. I graduated from Gonzaga. Very excited for the March Madness tournament coming up. We are #1 and I expect to stay that way. So I have, as we discussed a little earlier, I've got a couple questions that we can kind of talk about to fill the rest of our, oh gosh, almost basically, I'll say 15 minutes, about leadership and culture. And I think something that's really stood out to me from what Emily was saying, and also from hearing both of your stories, is this idea of community and being involved in community, and how leadership and being recognized as a leader is really recognition through community. And since you're working for, you know, the Siri Foundation, tribal nonprofit, making people's dreams come true with scholarships and internships and apprenticeships, how have you kind of seen this idea of leadership and community manifest?
Do you want to take that one, Kyla, or do you want to, we could tag team? So, you know, I think the thing to remember is, I think this is the phrase that First Alaskans Institute uses. And if I get it wrong, maybe Emily or someone can help me, but, you know, when we all come together, in every chair, there's a leader. And there's a leader in every chair, because you are a leader in one way or another. It all depends on what it is. It could be culturally, it could be academically, it could be in your family, it could be in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the thing we need to remember is, when you are working through and, you know, figuring out your life, it's how do you define success? You know, there's a lot of outside information coming at you about how do you define success. And the thing is, you know, you can pick the metrics that you need and want to. And we see people all the time come to us where by any other, you know, measurement, I mean, they didn't do very well in high school. They, you know, maybe they didn't graduate from high school and they got a GED, and, or, you know, they made it through high school, but it was not their gig. So we really, you know, with the Siri Foundation, we try and meet people where they are. And we have some opportunities for folks to get a Kickstart award or get a Restart award if they started and, you know, had an issue, a Jumpstart award. So if you are in high school and you want to get a Jumpstart on your next, you know, higher ed opportunity, you know, we try and meet people as much as we can where they are, because we have then totally seen people take that opportunity and just blossom, just bloom, because they found what motivated them to succeed, whatever that is, from literally becoming a, you know, a farrier, which is not riding on ferries. It's, you know, putting horseshoes on horses, to becoming, you know, literally working on a, you know, space shuttle, or, you know, being a doctor, or being a teacher, or being a welder, or, you know, or being a deep sea welder, because we've had people trained to do that. So defining yourself, you know, and figuring out what success means to you is really important. And And again, knowing who you are as a person and also trying to ground yourself culturally is really important and helps you have the strength to do that. And, as Emily was saying earlier, sometimes that journey, you're on that journey, you could be on that a long time. And, I am not 38. Let's just say that. I'm older than 38. And I am still trying to learn Tlingit because, literally my dad had his language washed out of his mouth with soap. So, we all have our stories along the way, and trying to then figure out how to connect in a way that strengthens us and helps us to move forward in how you define that. So I really want to encourage people to understand that, right now, because you're here on this Zoom, you are literally a leader in some way. So remember that.
Yeah, so it's a tough act to follow, speaking with Susan and having to go after her. But my other things that I would add to that are that sometimes I feel like, and I felt like this before in my life, and sometimes it even happens to me still, but leadership, sometimes we stick that word in a box, right? And it's sometimes can be kind of a scary or intimidating word. And I can remember looking at things and being like, oh, well, they're looking for, emerging leaders, or they're looking for, somebody who's at the CEO level to participate in this. And, maybe my level is, not up to snuff with the people, that are in the room. But it goes back to, that there is a leader in every seat, like Susan said, and that everybody has different skills and different things that they're bringing to the table. And so I think that thinking about leadership and the diversity of skills and the diversity of things that people are bringing to the table is, it's really powerful, because you do get to define your own success. And we need people in everything, leaders in communication, leaders in the classroom, and Susan said you guys are all leaders today. It's it's a big deal that everybody's together today, and that you are able to share with us what it is that you need to succeed, and what leadership means to you, and how we can play a role in helping define that. So those are the things that I would add to Susan's comments.
And adding in, in our statement of purpose that we ask people to write, because, there has to be some accountability. Our ancestors were accountable to each other. If you didn't gather the wood, you went cold. If you didn't, go, get the seal, you were hungry. So, there's accountability to community. And so when we do ask people to share a story, people who write their story about how they are taking care of their grandparents, or taking care of their sister, or taking care of whomever, and working to contribute through, gathering food, subsistence, or participating in some sort of, any of those kinds of things. That is leadership. They get credit for that, because it's leadership in their family, it's leadership in their community. It's how I think, as Emily was saying, we define who we are as Native people. And that's the thing that, I've had the same thing that Emily's had. People say, oh, you're Native? You don't look Native. Well, and the thing is it's like, you don't get to define that. We do.
Thank you. Yes. I think this idea, especially for my generation and the younger generations, is what does Native leadership look like? And you can see it, in CEOs, you can see it in the boardroom, you can see it in your communities, in your tribal leaders, and especially with, ANCSA hitting its 50th year, the leaders for ANCSA are, they are leaders, and they're different from, who I might be as a leader, going back to school for a law degree, fingers crossed, in the next year. And so I'm just kind of wondering about your perspective on leadership as time goes on. We've talked about the flexibility of leadership and how everyone is a leader, how anyone is a leader, but what do you think the future of leadership looks like? How do you think it will expand and grow, especially in our Alaska Native communities?
I was actually thinking about this question up until today. And I think there's a lot of different ways to come at this question. So I will just say that if you have not listened to all of the fabulous things that are out there, all the interviews that have been done about Inks at 50 and leadership, if you Google it, there are thousands. And there's a lot of different people have been coming at it from the business perspective, the culture perspective, the heritage perspective, and the Alaska Native corporation perspective, the legislation perspective. So, but I will, I'll say that, INCSA is only 50 years old. So that is like nothing. That is, a blink of time in the grand scheme of things. But I really imagine that, our leadership is going to have to be extremely flexible. And I think that my perspective in the last 3 years of leadership has been flexibility and resiliency and being super adaptive, which I think, Alaska Native people naturally have those things. But the Siri Foundation has gone, through an earthquake and then back to a new office building, which we only got to stay in for a few months before we had to send everybody home because of the pandemic. Taking some of our paper scholarship applications and being able to do those online so that we can get people what it is that they need to succeed. Having to implement policies to deal with people who have had COVID impacts while they're going to school. And, I think Susan and I share this leadership quality where we like to be planned, we like to be organized. I'm not a big think on my feet person. I'm like, I want to dwell about that and make a decision 3 days from now. Those days are over. I mean, we can do strategic planning. We can try to have our ducks in a row, but I think, having to be adaptable and, quick on your feet while also trying to make some really difficult decisions that are ultimately going to have the best outcomes is I still think going to be with us for the next 50 years.
Well, and just to tack on to that, the next 50 years, they will be very different than the first. Because if you think about it, the folks who had to take up the leadership of these for-profit corporations that got slapped onto the landscape, literally some of them, very, very few of them had some form of college degree. They were, maybe you had a teacher who had a college degree involved. A lot of them were fishermen. A lot of them were truck drivers. A lot of them were, people who had their own businesses and worked, nobody knew how to run a flippin' corporation. So they were learning on the job. And I think the amazing part is that through the forethought, say of Siri, for instance, Cook Inlet Region Incorporated, one of the very early on things that they did is set up the Siri Foundation because they realized that education was something, again, that nobody could take away from you, as Emily's grandma was saying, or someone was saying. Education was something that you cannot take away, and it impacts generations. And we are all about that in our Native community. And so the reality is look at all the amazing people who have degrees, who have training, who have experience, all of that wrapped up. I am just looking for the next 50 years of the ANCSA organizations, the tribal organizations, the nonprofit organizations. I like to think of it as sort of the sinew that has run through together, is education and culture and heritage opportunities. And we're pulling them tight so that the walrus skin is going to be taut and ready to go. And everything is just going to bounce forward. We're just going to fly high. That's how I like to look at it for this next period of time. And it's every single one of you that is going to make that happen. And you know what? I'm getting goosebumps right now because it makes me so proud and so happy to think about that next phase. So I do appreciate all of you. Garashish.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our time together. Wrapped it up very beautifully, I must say. And I just want to thank both of you so much for your time this afternoon, for coming to speak with us about your own journeys and also looking forward to the future. I'm so excited moving forward and knowing that we have the support of our communities and our families and our leaders in order to be the best people who we want to be. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having us. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing all of your guys' feedback and ideas and wonderful things that came from today.
Goodness, sheesh, I hope you have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you both for speaking. Okay, moving on to the next part of agenda, we're going to do another round of breakout sessions. Our next speaker is at 2:25, and so I'm going to mix the rooms up a little bit. We're going to have two sets of questions this time in Poll Everywhere, and so we're going to start off immediately with one question, and then I'll send and broadcast a message to everyone when the second question is up, probably about halfway through the breakout. So I'm going to put you in your rooms right now.
All right.
I just wanted to say I love your hair. It's so pretty.
Who's there? Oh, my hair? I don't know.
Great. Yes.
Oh, thank you. I was like, a compliment? Where's that coming from? All right. Hi, Pearl. How are you?
Hi, Brittany. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So
Great.
I'm gonna just introduce myself briefly and then the floor is yours.
All right.
All right. Chimay, my name is Brittany Vo. Ungmajiak is my Yupik name. My family is from the village of St. Mary's, Alaska. My grandparents are Domitil and Fred Ahlstrom. I am a tribal member of Yupik of Andreevsky and I'm a shareholder and descendant of Chilista Corporation. I first joined CITC as an intern the summer of 2020. After my internship, I joined the Recovery Services Department as an admin. And that was really fun because I got to learn a lot about like the programs that we offer. It's kind of crazy what you can learn just as sitting at the front desk answering phone calls. I then found the opportunity to work as the inventory specialist for the Fab Lab in the Youth Empowerment Services Department, which is my current position. I am also a full-time student at UAA pursuing my bachelor's in business administration. And I'm excited to announce that I will be graduating this December. Glayana, everyone, again for joining us today. Please welcome our next speaker, Dr. Pearl Brower, who is the Senior Director for Alaska Native Success at UAA. She connects Native youth to resources and opportunities at the university. So whenever you're ready.
Well, Kuyanakbuk, Brittany, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here with everyone this afternoon. So anakalotak apakalarevsi uvangan nakayak tenektun sinaga Dr. Pearl Kyan Brower okpiagaving miuranga savaktunga nana dinainamon savaktunga University of Alaska me Senior Advisor for Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity and Student Engagement. Kovesuktunga mangi tuminga maka uvalupak. So I just welcome everyone here and say good afternoon. My Inupiaq name is Nagaak, but I'm much more widely known as Pearl. And many of you who have known me for a long time, of course, know me as Pearl, but it's great to meet those who I haven't had a chance to meet before. I'm originally from the community of Utqiagavik, otherwise known as Ukpiagavik and otherwise known as Barrow. So I take all three, and I most often call it Barrow myself. And I work for the University of Alaska. I am the senior advisor to the entire university system for Alaska Native Success, Institutional Diversity and Student Engagement. And I am I'm connecting today from the lands of the Dena'ina. And so just give my quick land acknowledgement that I reside and work upon the ancestral land of the Dena'ina people. And their stewardship of this land over thousands of years allows me to call this place home today. And I acknowledge the rich cultural heritage of all of our Alaska Native peoples across this great land we call Alaska. And while my feet stand on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina, my heart and mind give gratitude to all of our Alaska Native peoples upon whose land all of our universities, excuse me, and campuses reside and beyond. So it's really such a pleasure to be with all of you today. A little bit more about myself as we enter into this space. It's quite the journey to go after all of the speakers before Emily, Susan, and Kyla. I just really enjoyed everything that they had to say, and really appreciate all the work that each of them does for Alaska and for our Alaska Native peoples. So and really, you know, Emily and my story is there's some interesting similarities, and that's probably why we're friends, and we enjoy visiting with one another. But I was raised both in Barrow and in Northern California. So my dad's, our family has been in Barrow for a few generations, and prior to that was actually my great grandmother was from the King Island area and Shishmaref. And then my mom's side of the family is from Northern California. And so I had really an incredible opportunity to live in both places. And really, a subsistence lifestyle, if you can believe that the community I lived in California was actually smaller and still is smaller than Barrow. So, but with that smallness in some ways comes an incredible, there weren't a lot of people like me, right? My brother and I were the only Inupiaqs there. But I always felt a real important connection to Alaska. So I grew up in Alaska, in Barrow until I was 8. And at that point, I moved with my mom to Northern California, but I went back every summer to Barrow, and I always felt this connection, and it was kind of the place I needed to be. So I went to school, I graduated high school in California, and then I went on to community college. But as we all have challenges and obstacles that kind of come into our lives, and we have to figure out ways around them, I was in a really bad car accident, which kind of shifted my my educational journey. And then about a year later, my best friend died in another car accident, and we were living together at the time at college. And so really a lot of different, life just was really challenging down there to try to continue to live and be in a place that had so many memories, and live in this place that we lived in together. And so I started thinking about what was I going to do. At the same time, I was, going to community college and really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself. What do you want to be when you grow up? And so I had this really interesting opportunity where because I was a lower classman, all of the classes had been taken that I wanted by upperclassmen. And so I picked an anthropology course because I had no idea what anthropology was. And it just so happened that it just sparked my love for Indigenous peoples and our Alaska Native people. And it actually, when they went to the session on Alaska, or, Alaska's people, of course, all the information that was being provided to this California class was wrong. And so I actually had the chance to say, well, I can tell you what it's really like. And it really sparked that interest in what I wanted to do. The result of kind of all of this was that I had my best friends from Barrow going to school in Fairbanks at UAF. And I thought, well, they said, why don't you come here? So I did. I finished up my associate degree in California, and then I moved on up to Fairbanks in 2001. And the best way I can explain it is really that I blossomed in a lot of ways. I loved school. I loved getting to know other Alaska Native people. Very much similar to Emily, it was the first time I was really surrounded by a lot of other people like me, and that I felt like I could see myself in others, and really not be asked those funny questions, that we always get asked when we're in the lower 48 about igloos and about, whales and all these things. And that there were people who were interested in, kind of me, and that I was interested in them. And then it also helped me, educationally. I did have a passion for our Alaska Native peoples, and I was able to really learn more and be immersed in what I loved. And so it was really wonderful. So I graduated from school with 2 bachelor's degrees, and I returned home to Barrow. And I worked I worked in our museum at our Heritage Center for a year. I worked for a few years on a really cool grant that connected Alaska, Hawaii, and Massachusetts with our shared whaling experience. That was really cool. We actually partnered with the Alaska Native Heritage Center. And then things, take another turn. And, we have I think in Alaska, we recognize how political things can get and how closely connected we are, but also having to deal with politics. And this grant that I was working on ended up being really challenging. So I was asked if I wanted to go out to work at Ilisaquvik College, so Alaska's only tribal college. And in 2007, I transitioned to Ilisaquvik. And I ended up working for 13 years at Ilisaquvik, 8 of those as president. And I loved it. It was everything that I wanted to do. It was giving back to my community. It was seeing my community members. And when I say community, the whole state of Alaska, because we had students from all over the state really meet the goals that they set forward in front of themselves, changing lives. I think education truly has the opportunity to change lives. And so that was really wonderful. And while I was there, I did finish a master's degree in Alaska Native and Rural Development and a PhD in Indigenous Studies, all via distance, also from UIF. So in 2019, we kind of closed out that chapter. We moved to Anchorage. And last year, I started working for the University of Alaska. And in amongst all of this, I met and married my husband, Jesse Darling, and he's from the interior. His family from Manaktouvik Pass and from Nulato. And we have two daughters. One is 3 and one is 10, and they keep us on our toes, and they just, are probably the very best things about both of us. And like I said, so now I get to work for the University of Alaska. And the biggest, I have a lot of work in regards to how do we engage students in the university? How are we a diverse university? And really thinking about being inclusive and have a lot of equity, but really a great focus on Alaska Native success and how important that is throughout the whole system. How we really need to make some changes, and we really need to be thinking about how our Alaska Native students feel comfortable within the university system, how we see ourselves in the university as Alaska Native students, and really want our our residents and from across the state to want to come to the university and get their education, but also, come and work and engage with us as community partners. And so that's what, a lot of my work is right now is in that area. And I love hearing all the students and everybody on the calls that are connected to the university, and hope many more, are able to have that opportunity in moving into the future. So there we go, Brittany, there's my intro, and happy to kind of dialogue with any questions.
Thank you for sharing. It's really nice to hear your story, because after you shared your story, I kind of see myself in you. I'm currently still a student. I haven't graduated yet. I went to community college in California for a couple of years. And during that time, I just felt a little lost. And then before the pandemic, I moved up to finish my bachelor's. And then I kind of I really connected with people at UAA, and just being here is I feel a more place of belonging. And it's kind of the challenges of okay, I'm about to finish my bachelor's, how long should I wait to try to pursue my master's? And it's just a lot, it just keeps coming. So what I wanted to ask is what challenges to success do you face?
It's a good, personally, I think, and I'm going to come back to something that's been kind of talked about, is that, I think we end up being the toughest on our own people a lot of the time. And this concept that, you're not Native enough. And if I think back to the biggest challenges that I've had throughout kind of my professional career, because, when I was in college, we didn't talk about that. We didn't, say, and I hearken back to Emily when she talked about Oliver Levitt, who's from my community. And, we didn't say, oh yeah, I'm just a quarter, or, oh, I'm just a little bit of this when we were in college. But it seems like when we get into that professional range, we're held up with kind of this meter stick. How Native are you? And I truly, that has been the biggest criticism of me and my work. I've never, I work really hard. We see a lot of accomplishments. We work as teams. We do all this, but the only criticism anybody's ever given me really in that realm is, oh, you're not Native enough. You didn't grow up here. You didn't go to high school here. And I think that if anything changes in the next generation, and with all of you as our next leaders, is really think about that, and think about, not measuring someone in that way, measuring what they do, measure their actions, and measure their passion and their care for our communities and our people, because, whether someone grew up or didn't grow up, at the core, it's what they do to make a difference. And if they truly, you know, are connected and they care, that's what we should be thinking about. And you know, let's just be realistic, you know, it's really hurtful, right? When you're trying really hard and you love what you're doing and you love your community and that's why you're doing it, to be told, you know, you're not Native enough, you know, we're not going to accept you because you're not Native enough. I think that we will be so much stronger as communities and as people across Alaska when we are able to get rid of that and not say that anymore. And I'm reminded that we hosted the Inuit Circumpolar Council in Utqiagvik a few years ago. And now, you know, the pandemic, like it's like 2 years, I have to think back even more than that. So, I mean, it must have been, you know, 3-4 years ago. And there was an incredible Greenlandic speaker who talked about that, you know, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not just welcoming all of our Native people kind of into the circle and supporting them because they are the future. And I'm just reminded about that a lot. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I have certainly faced in kind of my professional career.
Thank you. That was really thoughtful because I think it's really disheartening how like the phrase "you're not Native enough" it's almost normalized and it's almost like used like as a weapon to like alienate other people who like we're cut from the same cloth. Like why would you alienate this person? And it's just really hurtful and like a really sad to deal with.
It is. And it just, yeah, I mean, there's really no place for it. It's not necessary, right? Like we, you know, actions, you know, when you're giving so much and you want to be there. I mean, let's also, you know, we have a lot of out-migration in our small communities. And we should really, you know, respect and appreciate those who want to stay at home and make a difference. It's really important.
Yeah.
And we're welcoming people, right, Brittany? Like we as Alaskan Natives, like we love it. We're so welcoming, you know, not being able to be with one another right now and give hugs and all that. Right? So hard. But then, you know, but then on the flip side, we find that like we're pushing our own people away. And it's such a yeah, I really have a lot of faith that as all of you on this call, our upcoming generation, that we'll be able to get rid of that, and that won't be something that we think about anymore.
Yeah, I'm trying to decolonize myself so I don't think that way and I just don't project those thoughts onto our younger generation. So it's a really good thing to keep in mind, like not practice. And it's like hard to get this normal thing out of your head and trying to retrain your thoughts and like how you see yourself and like other people. It's crazy. Okay, so I think that is a good wrap up for our session.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, everyone. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and to listen. And I just offer a quick, you know, in higher ed, and if anybody needs anything, you know, I'll put my contact information in the chat. Definitely University of Alaska related or outside of that. So please, you know, I'm available and I'm around as a resource, and I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thanks, Pearl.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brittany, and thank you, Pearl. That was fantastic. Okay, so we're going to go into our next set of breakout rooms. The other questions can be posted in just a moment, and then we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. This one, right? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You know.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you guys can hear me. It's Taylor Higgins talking. I'm part of the Youth Advisory Council. It's really cool and really humbling to hear everyone's story and everyone's upbringing for leadership. And, it's really awesome. I feel like one question that we're all waiting for, even as youth participating in this meeting is just like, how do we get there? There's really, I feel like there's a lot of confusion sometimes, like, how do we become that great? What if we didn't come from a family of leaders? Really something me, like I'm the first generation in my family to be going to college and graduating high school on time. Me being 19, just knocking everything I want to do in life by storm is really inspiring to me. And just creating your own story. You don't have to be like the next person, and everyone has their own path and their own things that they go through. So I see that our question here is how does culture influence your education and or career, if at all? So I just wanted you guys to maybe kind of get out of your comfort zone. No rush or no pressure, but probably like kind of communicate. I really want to hear from you guys and see like what do you guys want to learn from me and what can I learn from you guys, and I'd really love to see and hear your voices. So if we can do that, but again, no pressure. I feel like culture influences my education. Just by sharing my story. Everyone has different stories. Being an Alaska Native, youth is just important. And just connecting with other youth and just always having good laughs and seeing where they're from. And Alaska is so huge, but it's so small. I feel like we're all connected, or somehow we all know the next person, or maybe our cousins or they're married. It's always so funny and it's such a good time. It's always laughs, it's always positive energy, and to hear like everyone kind of get out of their comfort zone and feel safe in their environment. And I feel like that's so important. I see a lot of the answers coming through. So like I see influences, individuality, culture, how does education, career, and there's just so many things. And I feel embracing who you are, identity, cultural identity, and seeing like where do you find yourself in your life. It's so important. It kind of gets nerve-wracking. I'm 19 years old, but I learned so much, and with the other leadership and hearing their stories. And not everyone's perfect. No one's perfect. And especially I feel like in the Native community, people kind of look at you like you are perfect, but everyone goes through their own things in behind closed doors, and people might hide it better than others, but that doesn't mean they're not going through anything. Everyone has to learn and go through their own humbling experiences. And it's you guys, Ashlyn and Charles, I feel like we're gonna be the next youth leaders. And even if that's not what you want to be, you might be it to your children in the future, or to your great grandchildren. Like it's just so many, like you're gonna be a leader to them. So it's like creating your own path and stepping in who you are, and who, like, it's so humbling. I want to know where we're at. We start at 2:55 with Kristen English, with our Youth Advisory Council, Brittany. Hi, Ashlyn. Hi, I love to see your face.
Yeah, finally have a space.
Right.
Like with like culture and like what I want to do, it's like it influences what I want to do, because there's so much that I know if I work to it, and if other like my peers work to it, we can make something better for like future generations.
Yeah.
Like
I
figuring out that thing you can do to help is the hard part.
I'm so happy to hear your voice and see. I've been waiting for someone to kind of just see. I don't know. I love seeing faces. I'm mad we're not in person, but the stuff we're going through. But yeah, I know exactly. I feel like, especially us being on traditional lands where our ancestors came from, and you know, like connecting with our culture. I just recently, you know, I did something that made me really proud. I made my first traditional nusquin. This is a Yupik headdress. It was really fun. It was really like humbling to me because I haven't ever like I grew up in a family where they were like struggling with cultural identity themselves, and so you know, just like that was so fun. It was just like in every sew that I did, like I had to put my positive energy into that. So you know, it's just like, you know, exactly like what they said, you know, you don't, even if you're like 55 and you're learning your language, or it's just so important just for you to be involved. And I thought I could never sew. I thought I'd never be able to bead. I was just putting these own stereotypes on myself, which was it wasn't good, you know? And so us being young and having to find what we want to do when we're older, I feel like is so important. And that self-identity and us being there for ourselves is just so important. And so I feel like you are going to be an amazing leader one day. And you know, and even if we don't come up from a family who are leaders, I feel like that's for us to do, and us to break those you know, those cultural generation kind of things, you know. And so we can create success for our children. So that's my goal. But you know, it's really cool to have you participate, and I feel you're comforting me. I'm kind of nervous, but you know, you're making me feel really like I'm doing amazing. So it's really nice to see your face, and you look great.
Hi, everyone again. Is Kristen available? Is she on here?
Yes, I am. How are you, Brittany?
I'm good. How are you? I was just going to introduce you briefly. I just didn't see your, oh, there you are. Okay. So our next speaker today will be Kristen English. Kristen is the director of the Alaska Native Executive Leadership Program, also known as ANELP, at Alaska Pacific University. Without further ado, she will be speaking on the Native surveying programs provided at APU.
Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to see familiar faces. And for some of you, I'm seeing your names, but part of my career story involves Cook Inlet Tribal Council. I spent, I think it was 11 years just about in total working there, which was really such a sweet spot in my career progression. So I guess I'll kind of do the life story, the short life story of myself. And I was born in Haines, Alaska. My mom she's passed away, Tlingit Aleut, and she grew up for the most part in Southeast Alaska, which is where she met my father. And they were living in Haines when I was born, but we moved to Anchorage when I was just 1 year old. So Anchorage has been my home. And you know, we've got 6 children in my family, and we were a very family-centered group. You know, my parents always impressed upon us the importance of holding family close. And, you know, you'll have friends and they may come and go, but, you know, your family's always there for you. And so, you know, that's been kind of part of who I've been growing up. You know, and I had the traditional Anchorage education. I went to Rogers Park Elementary and Rabbit Creek Elementary, and I graduated from Service High. And back then, back in the way back days, it was actually Service Handshoe. And I'm, I guess I'm a first generation college student, although I never really thought of myself that way. My mom did spend some time as a registered nurse, but at least, you know, my parents thought of us as being the first ones in the family to go to college. And, you know, my parents were very, you know, they always talked to us about the importance of an education, and they wanted everyone in the family to go that route. But neither one of my parents were raised in a way, you know, now you have the helicopter parents and they're planning out your college career and helping with high school and college planning and all of that. And with my parents, it was very vague, you know, yes, you should go to college, but it was up to us to figure out how to make that happen. And so, you know, the one thing that I knew, you know, back when I was 18 years old and considering the rest of my life, was just that I wanted to go out of state to college, and I wanted to go somewhere warm and sunny. That's about as deep as my analysis went. And things were, you know, a little bit easier back then. The state of Alaska had a really good student loan program that doesn't exist in the same way. And so, you know, I didn't even think about the debt that I was incurring. Every year I took out the maximum loan from the state of Alaska, and I got help from the CIRI Foundation and from Cook Inlet Tribal Council, and got all of those scholarships together. But I really never thought that much about linking my time at college to career. You know, to me, college was as much of an experience that I wanted to have as a pathway to, you know, to a career. And I started out as a business major, and I, you know, finished as a business major. And really the reason I chose that was, you know, in talking to my father, and he was just, you know, an ultimately practical man. And he said, I can remember him saying, well, Kristen, you know, I don't know what you're going to do, but it seems like people, you know, who go into business, they end up getting good jobs. And I thought, okay, well, you know, I don't know what else I want to do. And there's certainly something to be said for picking a major that your parents think is practical. And so I said, I'll be a business major. And that's been, you know, that's really kind of been my career path ever since. And it's had all of these really wonderful zigzags along the way. But I went off to college in Tucson with my best friend from high school. Took a little bit long to graduate. I took, you know, 5 years, and graduated. And, you know, sure enough, I got jobs. You know, a business major was a practical way to get jobs. And I did various things. You know, I did accounting and office management, and I ended up moving to Los Angeles. And I still didn't, I always worked, you know, I worked through high school. I started working, like, I think when I was 13 years old. I always had a summer job. I worked all through high school. I worked at Sears Roebuck, Andy's Caramel Corn, you know, you name it, seafood processing plants. So I always had jobs, but I wasn't really thinking about careers. After I graduated from the University of Arizona, I ended up in Los Angeles, and I was working at jobs. I wasn't thinking about career. I didn't know how long I was going to be in Los Angeles, but I became a California resident, and I decided just to keep going on this business path. And so I applied to MBA programs in California, and I was fortunate. I got accepted to UC Berkeley and UCLA and USC, and I had all of these options. So I picked UCLA because that's where I was living. And I really didn't expect this to happen, but I was able to get through the CIRI Foundation, a fully funded scholarship. And UCLA, unbeknownst to me when I applied, they really wanted to correct the fact that they really had no representation from Alaska Native or American Indians. I went to UCLA in 1993. And it was a big program, and I was only their second ever Alaska Native American Indian student. And so I got a scholarship from that. So that was great. You know, I didn't have to really worry about money when I was in graduate school. And I get started on my program, and they had a lot of diversity programs, and they had a club for the African-American students and the Latino students. And then they said, well, there's only one of you. So we can't really have a club for Alaska Native American Indian students. So we'll just let you go to any of our other minority clubs. And so I went to all of them, and they had special recruiting events and social hours, and employers would sponsor these little parties for the minority students. And it was wonderful because I met all these friends from these groups. But I really it started to hit me, there is this dramatic underrepresentation. And why aren't there more Alaska Native or American Indian students represented at the graduate level? And so it was a 2-year program, and I absolutely loved it. When I was an undergraduate student, I went to school and I worked pretty nearly full time while I was doing that, just to make ends meet, pay the bills, and, even that with student loans. And so at UCLA, since I didn't have to work and it was a full-time program, I really got to dive in and be super scholarly. And it was a competitive program. Everything was graded on a curve, and so they were only going to give out so many A's in every single class. So it had that competitive element, but at the same time, 90% of everything we did, all of our projects, were done as a group. And their philosophy was that when you go out into the working world, you don't work in isolation. You don't get to just run a project or run a program just the way that you want to do it. So we got all this practice in working with people and, compromising on the final product, and dividing up the chores of getting the work done. And I tried my hardest in every single class I took at UCLA, not because I really wanted to get better grades than my fellow students. I wasn't competing with them, but it was a really challenging program, and I just wanted to represent. I kind of felt this responsibility to show them that Alaska Native people had a place in these really challenging master's level programs. And darn it, I was going to be on the right-hand side of that bell curve. I might not be the #1 student in all of my classes, but I was going to be better than the average. And so I really applied myself in that and made some wonderful friends. I got to meet some of the sharpest, most capable people that I've ever come across in that master's program. So just absolutely loved it. And I still, even at this point, I'm in this MBA program, and I wasn't thinking necessarily, what do I want my career to be? I didn't have this vision of myself of being a CEO of some type of company, or it was very loosely formed for me. Most of my fellow students, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to go to Wall Street and they wanted to be investment bankers. They wanted to go into management consulting, and everybody wanted to make the big bucks. And I didn't really care about the big bucks. By this time, I'd lived in Los Angeles 4 or 5 years, and I really missed Alaska, and I really missed my family. And so the only thing out of my graduate program, I wanted it to get me back to Alaska. And I knew when I was done, I was going to come back to Alaska. So I still didn't have a career plan in mind, but they had at UCLA, they had a lot of companies come to campus and recruit. And there was one Alaskan company that came down, and it was Arco Alaska, a major oil company. And I had never thought about working for an oil company. Of course, growing up in Anchorage and in Alaska, I knew about the oil industry. My father was a land surveyor, and he surveyed the southern half of the pipeline, and he did a lot of work for the oil company. So I knew it was an important industry. But I was like, I want that Arco Alaska job. You know, it pays well. If I get that job, they're going to move me up to Alaska. They're going to help me. You know, they give you money to buy a house and everything, and you know, help you with those moving expenses. So I applied with Arco Alaska, and sure enough, I got that job. And I honestly still wasn't thinking thinking about a career. I just was always very work focused, and you know, something that both of my parents impressed upon everyone in the family. And I think with my father, he had 5 daughters and 1 son. And so he wanted his daughters to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And he wanted his son to too, but this was still back in the day where expectations for women were a little bit different. But I can remember my father saying, you know, Kristen, you really need to set yourself up so that you're not financially dependent on another person. You know, the people who go through life and who are able to be comfortable in making their own decisions, they can take care of themselves financially. And that stuck with me. You know, I think he probably told me that when I was, 13 years old. And so I always had this independent streak. I liked earning my own money. I liked buying my own things. I didn't like being dependent. And I didn't want my parents to have me dependent on them. They had too many kids for that. So I got the job at Arco. And it turned out to be a wonderful step in my career path. They were, it's a big global company. They had a lot of employee development. And because I was hired from this MBA program, I was kind of fast tracked. And every 2 years, they'd give me a new job assignment. So I got to do accounting and finance and human resources and strategic planning and long range planning and management communication, and wonderful 10 or so years working for the oil company. And then at one point I was like, you know what? This just isn't doing it for me. I've learned what I can learn, but it doesn't make my heart sing. I don't feel like I'm making the world a better place. And I want that now. I finally started to think, what do I want for my career that's really enriching? And so oil companies, they grow, they shrink, and when they downsize, sometimes they lay people off. And when I heard that they were going to lay some people off, I said, lay me off, please. I want to be laid off. And so I raised my hand. That's what they call it. You raise your hand and you wink, and you can get laid off. And so I got laid off, which gave me a severance package. So I had, a little bit of money in the bank, and I could take some time off. And for the first time, how old was I then? Maybe 35-ish, somewhere in there. That was the first time I really thought, what do I want my career to be? And I said, well, I could go back to college. That would give me a way to get a different type of career, something more rewarding. And then I thought, well, no, I don't want to do that. I've already got a master's. I don't want to leave Alaska. I don't want to get in debt. And so I said, well, you know what I can do? You know, the light bulb that went off. I said, I will apply at nonprofit agencies, and I'll just take an entry-level job at a nonprofit agency, and maybe they'll be able to see that these business skills will translate to the nonprofit world. And so the first job I applied for after leaving the oil industry was at Cook Inlet Tribal Council. And I was hired as the program manager for a youth education grant called MEDIAC. And the mission was to work with at-risk youth and expose them to media education so that maybe they would get excited in this. And I tell you what, I just loved that job. And from the time I started at CITC, you know, I came home and I was like, you will not believe how nice the people are there. Everybody wants to know how you're doing, and they ask about your day. And there's, you know, it's such a different feeling. And I knew I had made the right decision, that finally I saw not just a job, but a fulfilling career for myself. So while I was at Cook Inlet Tribal Council, I did the MEDIAC program management. I managed an HR department. I got to manage social enterprise programs, got to do a lot of administrative stuff, you know, a lot of different jobs. And I ended up as the chief operating officer before I left. But I think for me, out of all of that, those really great job experiences, what really made it so special to me was that was the first time I really got immersed in Alaska Native culture. When I worked at the oil company, they had about 1,500 employees, and it ranged. Sometimes there were 2 Alaska Native employees, and sometimes there might be 4. But so there was no cultural presence there. Certainly growing up, when I grew up in Anchorage, there was no cultural presence in the high schools or in any of the schools. I think the time that I really felt most in touch with my Alaska Native community growing up was when I went to the Native Hospital downtown. that was when I got exposure. Oh, and when I went to the CIRI shareholder meetings. But when I went to CITC, it was like the whole world opened up to me, and I got to meet, you know, so many wonderful people from across the state of Alaska and learn about the cultures and just learn about this way of being that is associated with being Alaska Native. And you know, it's interesting hearing Pearl talk about, you know, this kind of thing that gets thrown around about not being Native enough. And at Cook Inlet Tribal Council, no one ever made me feel that way. In fact, people would encourage me to always, you know, always introduce myself as Tlingit Aleut and talk about, you know, who I was as an Alaska Native. And at first, because it doesn't seem like it, but I'm quite a shy person. And it's like, oh, that sounds kind of braggy, or I don't feel like, you know, I don't want to claim a bigger Native identity than I quite feel yet. But over the years at being CITC, you know, I really felt like I could own it, and I had internalized it. And yes, I am Alaska Native, and I understand what that means, and I know what the values are, and I aspire to demonstrating those and even almost kind of emanating those values. So that was just, you know, you know, many of the people on the phone, I don't have to tell you this, you work there, but it was just really life-changing for me to have that experience. And then kind of fast forward, so I had my oil company career, I had my Cook Inlet Tribal Council nonprofit career, and now I'm at this third phase where I'm teaching at Alaska Pacific University. And initially, adapting to the academic environment was honestly quite a challenge for me. I think in part because it was such a stark contrast from all the warmth that comes from working in a tribal organization and from being around tribal people. And, you know, the transition to an academic environment where, again, you know, there's very little Alaska Native or American Indian representation at that time. It was difficult for me. I missed my people. I didn't instantly connect or relate to my fellow academics. You know, I just didn't feel like I spoke the same language. Now that I've been there 6 years and I've been able to kind of establish myself as within that environment as a voice for Alaska Native people and Alaska Native students, you know, that difficult transition period is over. And I had that, you know, that transition where it's like, boy, I feel like a fish out of water here. When I was, you know, with faculty and staff, when I was teaching, when I was actually working with students, then I knew I kind of had found another calling for myself. And I absolutely love teaching. I love getting to know the students. I love having to do all of the learning and to have to learn what I'm going to teach. So it's almost, I feel like I'm as much of a student as my students are. And right now, APU is working on becoming a tribal college. They're making a lot of really positive steps to be more, to increase their knowledge of what it takes to embrace the Alaska Native culture and to be a welcoming place for Alaska Native students. So I'm there at a good time now where I get to ride this wave of change with Cook Inlet Tribal, with Alaska Pacific University. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have. I hope I didn't talk too long.
Thank you, Kristen. That was a really incredible story you shared. Like, that was really awesome. Just like your hard work through like college and career. It's just really awesome. Really ambitious. I don't know if we'll have time for a question. We might have to.
I did talk too long. I'm sorry.
No. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen.
Well, and thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you both. And we're actually going to jump into our next breakout session. We've got one more question for the group, and then we're going to come back in 10 minutes. We'll wrap everything up, and then we'll cut you guys loose for the day. Okay, so I'm going to put the Poll Everywhere link back in the chat in case you need that again. And then I'm going to switch up the rooms a little bit. I'm going to recreate those, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Activate.
Hi. Hello, Brittany.
Hello, Taylor. Hi, Eric. Hi, Jordan.
Okay. So our question is, how does culture and self-identity align with success in business and in youth leadership? So, Brittany, I feel like me and you, we're really great young women, and I feel like, you know, we're learning every day, I feel like, about our own culture and our own selves. especially me, I'm so young. I'm like still the baby of like the council. So I mean, I'm just learning from you and Anne and everyone around us, and just putting myself out of like my comfort zone and just connecting with culture, like our language and land acknowledgements all the time, making sure like, especially me and Ronnie, I mean, we have so many tourists who come around. And so like teaching them, I love to teach people about our culture. I mean, us being Yupik and I just got my first Yupik name, which is so exciting for me. And yeah, right. It was so fun. And that was just such a like empowering moment for me. I mean, my family was so like, they were struggling with their own cultural identity. And so, and I had to find it myself just growing up. And so, I have my Yupik name, and I'm just so proud, and I'm just so excited for our own journeys and, our own youth that are in here. I see that they're in here, and I just can't wait to hear their side of the story and their journey and your journey and
yeah. Honestly, I'm still learning too. It's crazy. Like there's just so much to learn. It's like I will never stop learning because you can't learn enough. And it's kind of like one day when I have kids, I want them to learn Yupik. Like my mom speaks Yupik, and it's like, even though that wasn't like passed down to me, that's something like I want to be like, I want to have that for my kids.
Yeah. Now see some of the answers on here. One says it opens up support networks of people with similar ethnicities. Yeah, I agree on that. Like, there's just so many, it helps you gain confidence, like, and it helps you find yourself. Like, it makes you ask questions for your own self. Like, what do I really like? Who do I want to be around? Like, what do I want to work with in the future? Like, do I want to like involve my family in this? Like, it's just so many questions, and and you want to share it. I feel like once you get involved in your community, you want to learn, you want to teach it all the time. Like there's just it's unstoppable. Like it's so contagious. Like I feel like if you're surrounded with other Indigenous youth and you learn from them and they learn from you, and there's like this really connection. And when I met you, I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, like
it's so exciting,
right?
It's so exciting, like sharing knowledge and like having like similarities, and it's just like we're connected like that.
Right. And and we became friends just off the jump. I feel like that was just so cool. And I was the little intern. I was a new intern, and you're coming to help out, and I was like, man, like and it was just, I don't know, I feel like just surrounding yourself with good positive impacts, even if you don't know them, just like go ahead and talk, even if it's about something really random, just talk about it and just kick it off there, and so it's really fun. And now I'm just loving who I am. And
look at you now,
right? And I just give thanks to all of you guys, and it's just so fun. And so just like Emily said, our ancestors worked through us. And when I started with the Heritage Ambassador, she was like, just do it. Like, you don't do pageants, but just do it, and you're gonna win. Like, it's already yours. And it's just those words of encouragement that people need sometimes. And I'm always like, I'm like that too. I'm really positive. Like, I always try to give words of encouragement to the next person, even if I don't even have a clue who they are. It's just sometimes if you say something really nice, like, oh, I like your earrings or something, they remember that, and they just connect the whole day. So I don't know, cultural is so important, and you're an amazing woman, and I can't wait to see who you become in our culture.
It's kind of funny how the question is, how does culture and self-identity align with success in business and youth leadership? I find that like working in a position where I actually consider culture and have like a self-identity, I feel more like a leader, and like I find like more strength, and I feel more confident in myself than other positions that I've worked as that's not culturally centered, or being around people who aren't also Alaska Native.
Right. Yeah. And it's just cool to like teach the next person. Like, you know, like if I feel like we all work at a nonprofit, or if we can work at our own corporation, we can work with people who are non-native, but also just teaching them. And then, you know, like I always have people who are from like Texas or something compliment my earrings. And, you know, I always acknowledge the Alaska Native artists, and yeah, it's just so cool. And I always tell them to buy local Alaska Native. And I was at the Charlotte Jensen Native Arts Market, and I got to meet all the Native
Yeah,
artists, and that was
yeah.
amazing. And I see you there. I was so excited. And you know, it's cool. Just it's like our community together again. I feel like Anchorage is so big, and you know, we still experience racism to this day. And you know, and it's sad, but I feel like, you know, we can change that, you know. We can change that, and that it'll, you know, it'll happen. And that's why I'm really thankful for me to even have me even being on this council, and learning from all the elders around us. So yeah.
Nice. It's so fun to have you here, back here.
I was so excited to tell you about it. I was like, Brittany, you have to join. That was so fun. I'm really happy you're here with us. You're stuck with us forever.
We'll always be together. Okay, let's see. Should we go into the main room?
Yeah.
Okay.
Eric's like, come on.
How's it? I'm doing good.
Okay, perfect. Welcome back. So we're going to start wrapping up the summit. We're going to go ahead and we're going to show kind of the poll everywhere results, all those breakout session polls that we did. We're going to go through and just show you guys what that looks like. I think Tabitha's going to join us for our closing remarks, and then we're going to cut you guys loose for the afternoon. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quick. Okay, so for the first question, here's a look at everyone who's in attendance today. We have people as far south as Soldotna and as far north as Talkeetna. If whoever's in Talkeetna, can you unmute yourself? Can you share who you are? Okay, no worries. That's cool that you could join us though. Okay, so we're gonna go through to the next slide. If leadership was an animal, what would that animal be for you? Here's a look at all the responses, and overwhelmingly lions and eagles and wolf was the overwhelming response for leadership. So big, strong animals. I think I selected a turkey, so I was the only one who selected that, but whatever. Okay, going to the next slide. How has your story influenced where you're at today? I don't know if we can go through these individual, oh, here it goes. So here's a look at some of those responses. And please keep in mind, all of these responses we're going to share with our leadership, and this is really going to help influence not only CITC, but other agencies participating today in how we design our programs and really are strategic in targeting youth. So this is very helpful.
I'm loving these responses.
You can unmute yourself too if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, you can unmute yourself if you want. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide real quick. Okay, what is a barrier that you have experienced which could get in the way of work or school? Lots of stress, lots of motivation, college. Wow, those really do jump out, don't they? Okay. All right, going to the next slide. What could a program offer to help you overcome this challenge? Lots and lots of different responses. Okay, this is going to be super helpful. So these are all different strategies that we can help implement into programs to overcome those challenges. So we're going to give just a moment so you can take a look at those. Okay, and if anybody has any thoughts during any of these slides, you're welcome to jump in and give any feedback or thoughts. The floor is open. Okay, so the next slide, how does culture influence your education and or career, if at all? Here's a look at some of those responses. See a couple about influence and inspiration, creativity, learning. So very interesting. Okay, and then going to the last one. Okay, how does culture and self-identity align with success in business and in youth leadership? And here's some of those responses. Okay. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to exit out of this. And I do have one. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. One last question that we forgot to ask earlier in the session today. I'm going to send you guys the link again. This last question is for your name and contact email. And this way we can keep track of attendance and just know who attended today's summit. And so what I'm going to do is activate that question. You should be able to go to the link that I put in the chat and access it that way. And with that said, we've covered everything that we've talked about today. I'm going to pass it off to Tabitha Toloff, Chief Administrative Officer for Cook Inlet Tribal Council.
Thank you, Eric. I just want to say I really thank Eric and the Youth Advisory Council, Jordan, all the folks who pulled together to make this happen. Believe it or not, it's like planning a wedding. It's a lot of detail work that goes into this, but that's just because we really wanted to provide the most relevant information with these amazing speakers. And thank you to Emily and Susan and Kyla and Pearl and Kristen. We really appreciate your engagement and the time that you took to be with us today. And I do hope that you all got something out of this. I do encourage you to take that one survey that Eric has been talking about for the last 3 hours, because we will be using that information to infuse into our workforce development and leadership development programs. So super excited to see what you have to say and would love all your feedback. And with that, I just want to say thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a weekend. And I hope you really got something out of this last couple of hours with us.
Thanks for having us here. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so I'm going to close it down.
Yes, thank you, Gloria, for coming. It's really good to have you here, and participate with us. And everyone else, it's really nice to have you, and I'm really glad for all your feedback. And I hope one day you guys can join our Youth Advisory Council. Thank you and have a good day.